as it so often does on GrokTALK, the topic is turning once again towards Common Core. Anne-Marie Banfield from Cornerstone Policy Research has joined us. I'm starting to lisp because I'm still missing a tooth, which I'll get back next week. Thank you very much.
Yes, I'll be sitting in your seat.
You'll be sitting in my seat because I'll be having dental surgery again. So much fun. Anyway.
He'll be off in Dreamyland.
I will be off in Dreamyland, yeah. Oh, painkillers, Vicodin, yay.
Do you know why sugar rots your teeth? It actually doesn't, it's not the sugar damaging your teeth, it's when your sugar gets taken into your system, it makes your blood more acidic, it weakens your immune system and does a lot of other bad things. But it uses up the calcium in your saliva, so your saliva becomes more acidic, and that's what actually wears away at your teeth. So if you can cut down on the amount of sugar,
Well, I helped keep Coca-Cola in business for a good long time. So.
Yeah, right.
This was actually an impact-related tooth damage that I've had a crown there since I was 16.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I had it replaced, and then eventually that crown deteriorated the bone above it, and it all came out. They couldn't put a crown in anymore, so I had it all removed, all the way up to the jaw. They put in 2 bone grafts. That was fun. And I've had the last surgery was 2 months ago. I had the actual implant screwed in there, the tube that they actually put the tooth in when they're done. I'm getting the temp this week and another tissue graft so that when they actually put the final implant in, it'll look like a regular tooth with the regular gum line and everything else. It's incredibly expensive.
I don't even like a cleaning.
Well, okay, let's talk about Common Core.
I was going to say, as far as a crown, let's switch to the other meaning of a crown. We have the queen of Common Core activism here in the studio with us.
Very true.
Anne-Marie, thank you for coming in and spending more than a few minutes with Red Brock.
Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
And you should have a big, broad smile on your face because
do.
of what you helped to engineer.
I do. I'm cautiously optimistic from what happened in Manchester. But Manchester has decided to develop their own standards. What that means, we don't know. We'll know probably about May when they're actually developed. But I would say that was a very, very good sign. I think that we're seeing some schools start to look at what Common Core is all about. I think that they thought, hey, what's wrong with just a set of standards? And I think that they're seeing that there's a real problem with this. And they're saying, no, you know what, we can do better for our students, and we can offer higher, better quality standards, and we can keep, try to take back that local control that we're seeing erode with this whole initiative.
You posted a letter online from a parent or a statement that they made to the board. That was excellent. I think I posted it. I know I posted something you wrote. I think that, would you say that the parents are finally getting some inkling of what's going on, and their force coming out is what's really making a difference?
Absolutely. Oh yeah. One person can't do this. I mean, it has to be a community of parents, and I think that, there's been problems in education for years. We all know that. We all know that, we're seeing the dumbing down, we're seeing the results of that, and I think that people are getting fed up. And then they have this new national program. I mean, how many have we had before this? Too many. And now we have this new national program that's supposed to fix everything, and I think everybody's seeing that, number one, it's not going to fix anything, and number two, it can actually get worse. It can actually get worse, and I think that they're seeing that in the work that the kids are having to do. They're confused. They don't understand it. And a good example I always give to people is, it's one thing to ask a child, 2 + 2 = what? 4. And then it's another thing to say, now explain why. When you ask a child to explain why 2 + 2 = 4, that's a whole lot different. That you're not getting an answer that actually shows math proficiency. What you're doing is you're confusing a child, and I think that they're starting to see this and understanding that, wait a second, not only do we have a problem in this country right now in math and English and all the other subjects, but you're not helping my child with this new initiative. So I think we're starting to see some pushback from parents, and bravo to the ones in Manchester that came out. They came out to a couple board meetings. They pushed back. The board members, the mayor, Mayor Gastis really listened, and the superintendent, the superintendent came out to sell this stuff, and we pushed back and we said, no, we're not buying it. We're not buying what you're selling. And the superintendent listened, and they came back with a proposal. Now, the devil's in the details. again, we're going to watch what they come up with, because I've had people say, well, they're just going to, put a little bow and ribbon on Common Core and resell it as Manchester standards. And if they would do that, I think that they're going to see a whole lot of parents with pitchforks coming at them. So I'm hoping that they were genuine in what they presented, because what they presented certainly sounded like they were going to look at Common Core, they were going to look at all the standards, but they wanted to develop their own standards. They wanted to make sure that they were higher and better. And I think the people that were there were pretty energized by it, but cautiously optimistic, I would say.
Well, I think one of the biggest things that we've been seeing since we've started to get on board this train, we're seeing snippets from around the blogosphere. When Dr. Julian Cooper from Liberty Harbor Academy was on the last time, she talked about a quiz that was presented. We put that up. We got a few emails on that. But it's occurring in a lot of places where you're looking at this and going, this is not the academics that I learned when I was going through school. What the heck is wrong here? And the more you hear about everything's going to be computerized, well, how can parents? I mean, the biggest thing is we were involved parents. My wife is a teacher. I have a graduate degree. I always wanted to help my kids with their homework. And even back then, it was kind of hard because of the way that they were taught. Now it's almost impossible to be taught the right stuff, and you can't help them because you're saying, but that's wrong.
Right.
But everything's computer-based. How do parents, or how will parents cope with that?
That's a good question, because I kind of explained this question of why 2 + 2 = 4, and there's many other examples. There's a letter that a principal wrote in Brooklyn, New York. New York is up in arms over this right now because they're kind of ahead of the curve. They've implemented Common Core, they've started testing, and they're seeing the real damage, the real problems coming from it. And there's a letter from a principal in Brooklyn, she wrote to the commissioner. They're calling for the commissioner of education's resignation in New York right now, by the way. Oh yes. If this is any indication of what's to come, people are not going to want to be on the side of supporting Common Core if what's going on in New York comes to New Hampshire in a few years, once they begin the testing. But anyway, she explains in her letter that she cannot divulge the questions that were asked on these new Common Core tests. But she's in her letter, she's saying, wait a second, these questions are so confusing that the teachers couldn't figure them out. How are the kids supposed to figure out these questions? And she goes on to say that they're like trick questions, tricking these kids. And it's one thing to take her what she says, but there are mathematicians that I know personally in some of these some of the top universities that have looked at some of these sample questions, and even they are coming out and saying, wait a second, we have a real problem with these questions that are being asked of these kids. And if the mathematicians are raising a red flag, we need to take a step back and look at what they want them to know. So going back to your question about how parents can help their kids, that's a good question when the teachers are having difficulty teaching this. And they sell it as, oh, this is rigorous. No, this is not rigorous. This is a bad test. And we need to, if this is a bad test, we need to identify it. We need to go back to the time-tested tests that we've used in the past, Iowa Basic Skills Test, Stanford Achievement Test. There's no trickery in those tests. It's about, does your child know 2 + 2 = 4? Not go on and explain why. Those kind of things. I've tutored math. I expect a child to spell out their steps, when you're doing a long division problem.
Show all work on the
all
page.
work. That's not what I'm talking about, because I support that. It tells me where they've made a mistake. But when you're going into, try explaining a polynomial long division problem. How do you explain that? I mean, the questions are almost, I keep hearing this is a setup for failure. And if that is the case, we need to identify that, because right now, states like Florida and New York, the parents are up in arms. I'm watching videos and YouTube videos from these meetings with parents and teachers and administrators saying, wait a second, we supported this at one time. When this first came in, they all support it. I mean, just like what's happening in New Hampshire, there's a lot of people that are looking at this going, this can't be bad, we've got to support this. And they're all turning around saying, wait a second, we made a big mistake. We're seeing superintendents in New York, principals, who thought that this was a good thing, going, we have a real problem
They
here.
never looked at it. They were just handed
Yes.
handed a bill of materials, told by
Yes.
people up the food chain that this was what you wanted to do, and they're just, okay.
Yeah, it's just a set of standards. It's not just a set of standards. It's far, far more far-reaching from the federal government.
So I'm looking at this from several different views. One, we saw that, and this goes off tangent just a little bit, but I'll bring it around. You know, it's the links to the links to the links.
You've got 60 seconds.
All right, I'll go to the first one. What do you mean the principal
Sorry.
refused or couldn't reveal the question?
That's right.
We are
That's
we
right.
are all about open and transparent government. If we are paying for this,
That's right.
we are entitled, and I mean in the best sense of the word, entitled to know what the heck are we giving our kids.
Yes, I totally
So
agree.
Why did what was the reason she couldn't reveal them?
Confidentiality,
Of
those
what?
kind of things, of the test. Now, I will
To
tell
who?
to the test makers and to the
What?
I know. I
Wait a minute.
completely agree.
We're paying for this
Yeah.
stuff.
I agree. Yes, and I think parents need to demand. In Massachusetts, where they use the MCAS, which is, you know, MCAS was based on some of the highest standards in the country. After they would administer the test, you could go look at those questions. Parents could go look at those questions. Right now, I can't tell parents right now whether they're going to have access to these questions or not. That has not been answered. What I'm seeing right now is these test questions are not being revealed.
I
Let's
wanna
see them.
I want to
Let's
see the
them.
homework.
Yes.
Because
Well,
that's the dangerous
The
stuff that's coming
test
out.
the test that Dr. Cooper brought in, students were told not to tell their parents about it, that they weren't supposed to bring a copy.
Bingo.
But somebody snuck out
Yeah.
the test, and it went online, and bam!
Yep.
And I've seen several more versions of that. The Blaze is being pretty good about
Yes.
reporting this stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at this going, I can't believe what I'm seeing.
No.
And they're saying, parents, I mean, ay, 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 ay. You know, best way to take over society, Dr. Cooper, and I've used this phrase a number of times, authority transfer. Don't believe your parents, believe us, your teachers. And in California with Obamacare, money to the teachers to teach their kids how to tell their parents. The persuasive writing, I think, is what
Yes.
she
That's
called
what the Florida test was. It was a Democrat. You were a Democrat. Go convince your parents to be one. Pretty
Oh,
much. You know, that was kind of what it
Yeah.
was. I tell my kids, and of course my circumstances are different because I'm politically active and I'm up on the news and I listen to folks like you guys who bring us all kinds of information that we could never find without your help. Just because of the time, you know, it's
Yeah.
not enough hours in the day. I tell them, I said, if you see anything that doesn't make sense to you, it's a little hinky, you know, it asks a question in a way that doesn't make sense to you. I want you to tell me what's going on. I mean, my son was telling me in middle school that his English teacher was making them write papers on global warming
Oh,
or
boy.
whatever. And I'm like, all right, that's going to stop. You know, what does that have to do with English, you know,
Yeah.
as a course and things like that? You know, I said, when you see something that doesn't make any, just tell me.
Yeah.
And you know, this is when I will disagree. I don't necessarily believe that kids ought to have smartphones in schools. Not anymore.
My
That's
kids
right.
Use that camera.
Take that, take those videos, take those pictures.
Well,
exactly.
that's how we got pictures of the Obama sign in the Merrimack High School.
Yep.
You know, and no McCain, no Romney sign, and I started a big stink. And there's a conspiracy in the school. I didn't say that. I said, where's the opponent's sign?
Yeah.
I said, if
Yeah.
you're going to have their sign, I want to see his
Yeah,
sign.
and they
then
can't
you've gotta
deny you
have
that.
the- You've got to have the Gary Johnson sign and whatnot.
Yeah,
I mean, if
you've got to have everybody represented.
Everybody,
You know,
yes.
if you want to lean left,
I
at
did
least have the common sense to put them both up there so that you don't get caught.
I did a citizens petition last year for the Winnicott High School District saying there's going to be no more politics being pushed in the schools. It passed overwhelmingly.
Wow.
And no more having teachers being paid and school district employees being paid to hold signs while they're being paid out in front of the voting place. There were something like 4,500 or 4,600 people who voted that year, and they all saw the wording in that. And I had people coming out, you know, I was holding a sign in Hampton. I had people coming out and thanking me and shaking my hand and saying, you know, why hasn't anybody else brought this up
Okay,
before?
we need to do that.
Yeah, you should email that. We'll put it up and start pushing it out everywhere
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
we had in the civics class in the high school, they would put up contact information to go work for the OFA office in Manchester. But I asked my kids, I go, go into that classroom. I asked other people's kids, people who are activists,
Yeah.
who have cell phones with cameras. I said, I want you to send your kids, ask them if they can go in, take pictures. I want to see if there's 2 sets of contact info. There isn't. There's
No.
1 set of contact info.
Oh boy.
Well, let me give you one from several years ago when my friend
That
Greg,
stopped, by the way, after
Yeah.
I was accused of complaining about a conspiracy that I never said existed.
yeah, Greg Nidich was running for state rep, and the voting in my town, Guilford, is at the junior high, or the middle school, as they call it now. And he was out holding signs. One of them was for Jeb Bradley. Now, I thought this was a great idea. A lot of the teachers would bring their classrooms out to say, here's civics, all of that. Well, one little boy pointed to a sign, and it was Jeb Bradley's, and said, who's that person? You know what the teacher said? That's a bad man. He's a Republican.
Oh boy.
Wow.
Oh boy.
Oh, yeah, I've told this many times.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
you know,
But they do it to the teachers too. The teachers, a lot of them are under pressure
yeah.
not to
Oh, yeah.
express any view other than that.
and they
particular-
shouldn't. They
Yes,
should have just
exactly.
said that somebody running
Yes.
for office,
But
running for
administration
whatever.
and right up the food chain there's a lot of pressure
Yep.
from the union and a lot of different places. My wife is a teacher in Bedford. It's a very Republican town. She works at Riddlebrook. It's a very Republican, part of the town. A lot of money. A lot of money. Some of these kids get dropped off in limos. Okay, that's how much money they have. The au pair brings them, and
I live
it's
in Bedford.
it's a very Republican town.
Yep.
And a lot of the teachers are in that school Republican, but they can't say they're Republican.
And they
Because-
shouldn't.
No, they shouldn't. They shouldn't. But I mean, even just amongst the faculty, it's not brought up, and I think it's a good thing because
do
there's
too.
enough tension there that nobody talks about it either way,
Yeah.
Yep.
and
Well,
that's
you
how
know-
it should be.
That's right. It's not a political. It shouldn't be a political, place this isn't a place we're supposed to be educating kids, and then you know what, they grow up and they can make these decisions on their own. I don't want it to be the right side pushing their stuff, and I don't want it to be the left side. Let's just educate them. If we could accomplish that, that would be a huge accomplishment
not
in this
doing a very
country.
good job of
No,
that, so.
no.
Now, with the push that government has to be involved in everything.
Yep.
Obviously, Common Core has become very much politicized.
Yes.
That's why you're here. Do you see it, we're on the liberty and freedom side of the right. Do you see this as a Republican versus Democrat? Do you see this as Republican establishment joining with Democrats? Do you see this as crony capitalism, the Bill Gates Foundation and all that stuff? Now with a throw-in from from Secretary Arnie Duncan, throwing in, here's race to the bottom money. Race to the top money. Excuse
yeah.
me.
Here's kind of the history of this. First of all, this has been an agenda for a very, very long time. It's been an agenda from the progressives, to be quite honest. So
An agenda as far as what?
as having national standards, changing the face of public education. This Common Core is just one part of the redesigning of public education in this country per the Obama administration. If you go to the U.S. Department of Education's website and or you just Google U.S. Department of Education redesigning public education, you're going to pull up a page, and it's going to take you right to the U.S. DOE, and it's going to kind of spell out their redesigning of public education. I'm sorry, but I didn't realize that this was a federal initiative, that we gave them the power to do this, but it's clear that they are going to take that power and they're going to run with it. So this has been in the works. Right now, I would say that we had a lot of people who weren't really educated well on what this all meant. So we see a bipartisan effort to bring it in. There was Republican governors who signed up and said, sure, this sounds good. And you had Democrat governors. So it was brought in, but the agenda itself behind it were a lot of progressives. Mark Tucker would be one. That's Mark with a C.
Is it being hijacked?
No.
Nice idea. Better standards, because we always complain, we're falling behind.
Yeah.
It's nice to have better standards.
Yeah.
But, you look at former Governor Jeb Bush out
Yeah,
of Florida,
big supporter
who
of this,
basically
yeah.
said, why don't you all just shut up?
Yes,
Yeah,
and
this
Florida
goes
is
over well.
angry about this. The Florida parents are in an uproar. So it's not working well in Florida.
But is it, we could say that, is he a Republican progressive, but I'm not going to go there just yet.
The superintendent listened, and they came back with a proposal. Now, the devil's in the details. Again, we're going to watch what they come up with, because I've had people say, well, they're just going to, put a little bow and ribbon on Common Core and resell it as Manchester standards. And if they would do that, I think that they're going to see a whole lot of parents with pitchforks coming at them. So I'm hoping that they were genuine in what they presented, because what they presented certainly sounded like they were going to look at Common Core, they were going to look at all the standards, but they wanted to develop their own standards. They wanted to make sure that they were higher and better. And I think the people that were there were pretty energized by it, but cautiously optimistic, I would say.
Well, I think one of the biggest things that we've been seeing since we've started to get on board this train, we're seeing snippets from around the blogosphere. When Dr. Julian Cooper from Liberty Harbor
listened, and they came back with a proposal. Now, the devil's in the details. Again, we're going to watch what on that far left, but we found common ground. Now, I will say this, a lot of the union heads do support this. Randy Weingarten does support this. She's the head of the NEA. So but if you look, you'll also notice that Gates made large donations to these union organizations.
Oh, follow the money.
Follow the money. Now, would they come out and say that that's why they support it, because of his donation? I'm sure they would say no. But they are getting a whole lot of teachers who are angry at them for signing on. They're coming out critical of the testing, and the testing certainly needs to be criticized, but it's the whole ball of wax. You can't just say, okay, I don't like this, but I like this. You know what, this is a whole big package, and it's kind of like Obamacare. It's the same
That's
thing.
what I was thinking.
Yeah, it's the same thing. So for education,
We had this great idea. There's about 30 million people who need insurance. Let's spend trillions of dollars to destroy the healthcare system.
And the 30 million people are still going to be without insurance.
31 million. It's more now.
Oh, it's going up. Yeah, we're going to turn it all upside down for 97% of the population to help those very few.
Yeah.
And oh, by the way, now we see why it was done in the first place.
That does sound like Common Core. This is, ladies and gentlemen, this is the template for central planning. For those of you who don't understand it, we see it in healthcare, we see it in education, we'll see it in energy. They just ruin everything.
Yeah, I mean, it's taking 1930s, 1940s, maybe even 1950s mentality, central command and control, even as every other part of society is going to decentralization as we go forward. But this is the reverse, in that traditionally, especially here in New Hampshire, it's always been local control. I can go knock, or I can go pound on the door of my local school board member. My town's small enough. Even in larger towns, you can find your local representatives.
For now.
It's like with the International Baccalaureate. Who are you going to go complain to? Nobody.
Thanks, I didn't know how to pronounce that until now, by the way. I appreciate that.
For 300 years, from colonial times all the way until, World War I, almost until World War II, the vast majority of kids went to private school. 85+% of kids went to private school, and parents enjoyed a wide array of Catholic, Protestant, secular schools, a wide choice of schools of different standards, and the kids enjoyed a much, much better, endured a more rigorous education. Most schools had a more rigorous education. There was someone found an old 4th grade math book from the 1850s.
Yes.
10th grade level math.
Yes.
Math questions, and in the back of the book, the harder questions were college level math for these kids.
Right.
And that's the level of education they had by 8th grade.
But it's not college level math, it's 4th grade level math being taught in college today.
Yeah.
Someone put a meme up on my Facebook page, and it said something like, years ago high school students learned Latin and Greek, and today college students are learning remedial English. Right,
exactly. We have a 65% remedial rate in this state, which means if your kids graduate from high school, they're going straight into remedial classes. 65%, which is an absolute outrage. So, they say, well...
Oh, come on, we're only spending like 10 times as much.
So they're like, well, we have this problem, we have to fix it. We do have a problem, and I acknowledge that. And under Governor Lynch, we had some of the worst academic standards that you will find. So, it's interesting.
Yeah, but everybody was graduating.
Yeah, exactly. Because they were forced to.
That's right.
And,
well, did they graduate, or were they just forced to stay until 18?
We don't have a lot of time to get into this, but they just changed the definition of graduate. Anyway, I'm sorry.
Yeah, but with 65% remediation rate, that's a real problem. And you know, let's who's accountable for that? I mean, we had a former governor who left office, and you know, it seems that there's no accountability there. What did he do to fix it?
The bigger the government, the smaller the citizen. Just as we're seeing with Obamacare right now, just like we saw with Fast and Furious. Do you really think that anybody in government is going to be held accountable for these fiascos?
But they want to hold the teachers accountable now to this test. That would, you know, the teachers are now going to be evaluated on this test. And if you remember, I go back to that test where I'm thinking, okay, we have a real problem with this new test. It's tricking kids. English teachers can't figure out the questions. Math teachers can't figure out the questions. Now you have parents who can't figure out the questions, and they're going to be tested on these questions. So now you're having teachers evaluate. So we're going to hold them accountable. And you know, I'm not opposed to holding a teacher accountable when it's fair and equitable. But this is almost, you know, we're not going to hold the bureaucrats who force this into the classroom. We're going to hold the teachers accountable because you force something that's untested, unproven, that is, you know, people are criticizing now for being nothing but a setup for failure.
But as long as the politicians are controlling the funding, they're going to control the schools,
right.
and we're going to get it more and
Well,
more.
right.
we're going to tell you about something you can count on, and that's GrokTALK. And we will be back shortly. Anne-Marie, thank you for coming. Max is with us. John Heichel's supposed to be next. I don't see him yet, but he might be here.
Ooh.
We'll be right back.
Grok TV.